All right, we're live and we are here to discuss AxeGenAI's effort to educate the spectrum of individuals that are interested in AI machine learning. And we would like to answer as many questions as possible. Uh, from our experience of being in the AI side of things for the last 10 years and cloud, other IT solutions, including blockchain, including capabilities of implementing AI through BPOs and ITOs. One obvious patterns that we have really came to face that is far difficult than to explain is that if we have a interaction and that interaction is based off of questions that we ask, uh, we are bounded by the answers and the limitations of these answers for that interaction. What we are attempting at this point is to feed as much information as we can to the populace that should be asking us the questions because we are the solutions provider. Um, Better questions the audience can ask, uh, better interactions we have, and we get to the bottom of what is the actual problem much faster. So if I was to give you a generic scenario that we have dealt with previously, is that by the third, fourth iterations of the problem solving, we realize that that's not the problem that is what needed to be solved. There's this other segment that has been blindsiding for us, right? So a good project manager role is to identify these blind spots and address those blind spots and incorporate them into the solutions, be it that might be the only solutions that a project manager will focus on. So, a good question comes from a good knowledge base, and sharing this knowledge is what we in XGen AI are focused on these days. How do we engage with the audience that is able to ask the questions and ask those questions in a well-informed manner that the answer does not mislead them? And how do we interact with those questions in a fast-paced manner where scalability and sustainability is not jeopardized? In all IT solutions, all information management solutions, it's the matter of, yes, there are IT solutions, but does these solutions scale and sustain itself over time, or does it become a burden over time? And that's the key differentiator for me specifically, is that not all IT systems are solutions. They are more likely to be a burden over time, either to the wallet or to the workforce and the daily operations, and pay out an invoice or receiving invoice. So you have uh, knowledge management, and as we are speaking of the knowledge management, for a few previous episodes, we have discussed a project lifecycle, MLOps, cost of this project life cycles, and we have discussed these variety of topics in multiple prongs. So, for example, a large language model, which is the lowest hanging fruit at this point because of its high availability, um, it's a investment that a lot of organizations are making and realizing a lot of the fast, quick mistakes that they have to really address. And what we are seeing is that even though they are seeing this large language model as a lowest hanging fruit, great return on investment, and yet it does become burden over time because how it was approached does not necessarily allow it to scale, even though it is sustainable. Large language model can sustain itself. It operates. It does things that a business operation will require on a daily operations. Yet it's not for scaling. It sustains itself, and the sustainment cost goes up over time or decreases over time, depending on how that large language model cost has been analyzed in a cost benefit analysis, right? Because large language models are not the only piece of the equations. What you do with that large language model is the scalability, the sustainability of this discussion. So we have a few slides here just to accompany a visualization, but the conversation is not that narrow. Based on the audience, if you're listening and you're understanding that these are the topics that you're concerned with, that's the first step to the equations. At one point or another, you really have to become proficient enough to question the concerns that you have or this implementation that you have in your ideation phase. If you were asked the right question, how do you write the requirements for that question? And how do you collaborate around that question? So when you write your requirements and you're designing that requirement, how do you develop it? And if you do develop it, do you pass the audit? And if you pass the audit or not, does it scale or sustain itself in production environment or the deployed environment? And if you were to scale it and sustain it, does it cost more? Because lowest hanging fruit doesn't necessarily mean it will grow the rest of the tree. It is part of the tree. It's not necessarily growing the rest of the tree. So it's easy for us to focus on multiple topics. And I say that with the understanding that if we were to focus on large language model at all times, we will come to a conclusion that is not, in my opinion, is not favorable for me. Because large language model is a small picture inside of the big picture. It's very necessary. It's probably one of the closest things to the baseline foundation of what an AI will create impact on in coming years and months. So knowledge management has always been my first go-to. And even without large language model, 5 to 6 years ago, it was really difficult to talk about knowledge management. But what we had is an algorithm that was able to engage with knowledge management without large language model. But that was in a very small scale. And today, because of large language model, we have far more capabilities that are unprecedented, in my opinion, because once we have seen the large language model and its benefit, it made sense that we go after large language model. But that means that we are skipping few things, right? We're skipping the process mining, the business process mining. We're skipping those capabilities that crawlers are able to bring to the table. So that way the large language models are able to incorporate within those process mining and help with a business development, a business justification for this large language model. So if you want to scale and sustain your large language model project and you want to, have it be funded, you really have to understand these other AI topics that makes AI far more attractive than just with large language model. So I have created a few slides just to go as a visual to the conversation here. One topic that I really think that goes undiscussed, that's not necessarily the word, but take it for what it is. It's undiscussed, right? I really want people to discuss it. It's that if you are onboarding people all the time, and there are exits that are happening in your organization all the time, that means there's a need for knowledge management within your organization. So if you're onboarding continuously and your onboarding used to take 6 months, but through fine tuning of that process, your onboarding becomes 6 days, right? A week of onboarding. That's a great outcome of fine tuning your process because you have identified over time how it used to take 6 months to onboard somebody. And here you are onboarding in 6 days using either information management systems or process fine tuning. So if you have this kinds of concerns of onboarding, take that scenario of having an individual exiting your organization. In between onboarding and exit, there's tons of knowledge management that needs to happen. So, what do I mean by that? I mean, if you are onboarding individuals, uh, what sort of knowledge management do you have in place, and how does that knowledge management being utilized, right? Do you just hand over somebody a binder full of pages and say read through these and figure out all the information you need, or is it digital? And if it's digital, how hard is it to consume this digital information? And on top of everything, are they being utilized? Did you collect the information, and are those informations on page 300 is going unread, right? People will read page 1 to 10, and rest of it is just not necessarily something that will consume. This knowledge management process, I believe, has a tremendous potential, which is very close to large language model. You really have to utilize large language model, but how do you create this knowledge management that is of unheard of proportion? You are taking knowledge management to a whole nother level, right? And the way you are able to achieve that is by either basing yourself correctly for knowledge management purposes. So that way it is a scalable and sustainable knowledge management platform that has AI baked into it. And it interacts in a way that it grows over time rather than to say it stays stagnant until somebody adds new information, and that new information really has to be um, um, stacked on top of the old knowledge, but rather than fusing them together to say that's the old way, this is the new way, there's the differences, there's the deltas. So the knowledge management key is very very much the lowest hanging fruit that I would say has a huge return on investment. um, the plus side of all that is onboarding and exit of your workforce. Within that workforce, you are upskilling your workforce as you update your knowledge management for AI infusion. So, machine learning is a topic that you will eventually upskill your workforce for, right? As much as we can talk about AI, really let's identify what it is that we're talking about actually. It is machine learning. Machine learning is the term that makes AI. One of the best ways that I can explain it is that if you have multiple machine learnings and you are incorporating all these machine learnings, it becomes an AI to the users, as in the UX side, user experience. But behind the scene, it is all machine learning. So if you are utilizing machine learning and you're upskilling your workforce for machine learning, and the benefit of upskilling your workforce for machine learning will pay dividend, right? Because your workforce will be able to accomplish more with less time required. That means you're able to get more things done on time, with visibility, the auditability, and the ability to stay ahead of competitions. You have all sorts of benefits. So if you were to upskill your workforce, would you upskill the workforce for the purposes of targeting a segment of the workforce, or would you upskill your workforce for the purpose of knowledge management? Because I think it goes hands in hand, right? So if you were to pick a project and you lay out all the projects that your workforce should be upskilled on, I think that's what we provide in AxeGenAI. We provide the capability of picking a specific use case that your workforce can be upskilled for, and that use case is your use case, not necessarily a use case that comes from industry or outside of your organization. That is your organizational project. This project we upskill your workforce for. And when we do that, do we pick any project? I think we can. But if I had a recommendation, it would be to say knowledge management, right? If we upskill your workforce with knowledge management, that is far more, I would say, your workforce is very well versed in it. And to have upskilling done for that knowledge management purposes, it creates a visualization for the workforce to say, aha, this is the difference that this knowledge management AI will make, this knowledge management machine learning will make in my daily routine at work. and it makes a huge difference in that understanding. So quick quick access to information, right? And then you have NLPs, search functions, making it easier to find relevant information quickly. So, okay, how often it is that you are at work and you have to search for information, right? Depending on your size of the workforce, size of activities, and size of your databases, and size of the organizational need for search queries, right? So if you have all these things that you can think of on a daily basis, how long does it take in order for that knowledge management to happen? So depending on what sort of software you're utilizing, you probably do have a good visual of sort of search queries that you are involved in on a daily basis. One piece of it that is not necessarily you have visualization over is the data that is not in your database, right? Unstructured data, for example, your Zoom calls, or the documents that are not necessarily visible to the search query, right? If you had a specific set of information that you're looking for during a Zoom call, from the Zoom call, is it being recorded? Is there a notes taking device? Was there a way to identify the projects and the project numbers, right? Or a serial number or equipment number? Whatever the case is, how does your search query interact with your workforce? If it works very well, it works very well, but there are tons of data that it is not querying against. So these NLU, which is the natural language understanding, and you have NLP, natural language processing, which is ultimately is a large language model, and which a large language model will be able to help you to do better knowledge management. But these are sort of the first set of benefits of knowledge management and machine learning. Um, because of the software that you're utilizing today and the service level agreements that you have in place, you might have a limitation on the search queries and the database that the system is querying against. If you had these systems that are sort of working in parallel with your software system and is providing you with another set of understanding of other data sets that is very close, like a tier one, as in these are the data that you do not want to outsource to for a software that comes from outside. It's a difficult challenge, but it is worth upskilling for, because that process of upskilling discovers all of these blind spots that we're not so privy to have a visualization on, right? Excuse my distraction there. So the slides went a little bit haywire here. AI chatbots and AI agents is what we are very familiar with these days. AI agents are becoming far more relevant in the daily operations, but not to the extent that Chat GPT or AI chatbots have been. Right? AI chatbots have been the sort of decades-long conversation, and AI agents are sort of the next level of conversation. Because using chatbots, we can create AI agents, and those AI agents are far more effective than chatbots. So an expert systems and utilizing your knowledge base, which is that the key individuals that are in your organization that can identify your operations and the gaps in between fast. How do we bridge that gap using a knowledge management expert system and AI agents? Because these interactions between silos, and if I may call it a business unit sometime, how does the AI agent interact, and how does AI agent keep you up to date on your knowledge management? And that is something worth discovering as well. So these are all going back to upskilling your workforce. So if you're strategizing to say, I have these key personnel and I would like them to be upskilled, how do they ask those right questions? And if they are enabled with knowledge, if they're asking those right questions, these questions leads to a faster transformation of your organization's need for AI machine learning adoption. Because a lot of the organizations are still on the standby and sort of to say like, let there be a sign for us to adopt AI today, right? That's necessarily is not the way it works. You really do have to start with your key personnel, a human in the loop, and the ability of these individuals to ask the right question, and that leads you into the right sort of investment. So when your key personnel are making decisions, are they making those decisions based off of a outsourced information, or is that also matched with the internal information, internal knowledge, and combined together? They're seeing a dashboard, or they're interacting with the AI agent system to confirm that their decision making, be it super autonomous versus very little autonomous, but they are at least being augmented. The key personnel are being augmented for their decision making through an artificial intelligence system. Be it that it's providing a score of a decision to say, this is how relevant this decision is to all these other topics. How does it score it? Does it score it highly, or does it score it very poorly? If you had a team of decision makers, are they able to interact with an AI system to say, as a team, we decided to do this, and how do you score this decision based off previous decisions that we have made, previous investments that we have made, this can unfold into many different topics, as in cost benefit analysis, right? Did we pay for this specific item back in 1999 for this much, and how does it cost this much today, and what sort of cost benefit analysis do we have? Right. So I think there's lots of query that will happen inside of your system. And a lot of the big organizations already have it. A lot of the workforce already have it. It's just that, how do we improve on it with those other sets of data that we're not necessarily tapped into, because the way it was structured is no longer necessarily available for query purposes. So there's a tons of benefits to that. So like going back to that upskilling conversation, not upskilling, onboarding conversation. When you're onboarding your employees, it has lots of these drop down options of how does AI machine learning and upskilling of AI machine learning really helps you, right? In a surface level, if you're onboarding an individual today, let me be careful here. Let me just stick to the potential, right? If you're onboarding an individual today and they see you utilizing machine learning and AI for your knowledge management purposes, it's far more likely that individual will will benefit and enjoy this onboarding process, because a lot of these individuals are looking to organizations to say, how secure are you for the next 5 to 10 years, right? How advanced are you? How advanced is your IT technology? How advanced is all your systems that, if I was to work here, I would benefit from working here because of how advanced you guys are with your information technology, specifically with AI, machine learning, and large language models. Because we are experiencing machine learning and large language model in a heavier scale today than previously. And for us to have a life outside of work, which is heavily reliant on large language model and machine learning, yet at work, it's a two different separation of world, as in one doesn't have any AI or large language model in it. It's still that manual onboarding process. I think it creates an impression that lasts a while, and it comes down to a job satisfaction and the retention impact on the retention over time. So I want to really target the onboarding piece, because if you are onboarding today and you're using AI machine learning and you maintain a sustainable and scalable knowledge management solution for the life cycle of a purpose, that life cycle of a person that works in your organization, you have tons of these benefits of knowledge management for future onboarding and retention purposes and purposes of job satisfaction. And they all benefit you in multiple folds, right? As in, you have a visualization over all the knowledge that are going in and out of your organization. So I won't go far into the sentiment analysis side of things, but as you can imagine, it does personalize, right? It does personalize the way an individual is able to interact with your information system by large language model that is personalized to their needs. So let's say, for example, you have a team out in Australia, and you have a team out in Singapore, and you have a team out in Germany, and then of course you have a team in US, wherever they are. It's personalized to their need, right? So this large language model's capability of, even the free large language model has up to 30 languages at this point, right? And that's a key potential source of improvement, a key source of a ingredient that you need in order to improve your workforce's job satisfaction, as in they're able to understand a language that is built for their local understanding of things, right? So Australia speaks English, US speaks English, German, they speaks English, but in German, they're not necessarily using the English that we would use in some part of US, right? Because they have local dialects there, right? In Australia, you have local ways of saying things. In Germany, you have ways of speaking English that is not necessarily same as somebody speaking English in California. So you have a very personalized approach to this topic. So how do you do all of these with data security and compliance? Well, of course, you have to really upskill your workforce, because if you entrust the data security of a large language model that is being provided to you as a service from outside, you really do miss that big picture, as in what they're able to bring to the table is not necessarily the 100% of what needs to be on the table, right? What needs to be provided as a service. So you really have to upskill your organization to say, if I was to engage with another organization, how do we interact, right? How do we interact, and who it is that we bring to the table from our organization to interact with the system? And if we do, is that person really upskilled or knowledgeable enough to ask those questions in order to make sure that these services are something that we really need to subscribe to or pay into? So it's been about 30 minutes of discussions. As you can imagine, I'm trying to wrap, 3-4 semesters worth of information in 30 minutes. And I'm notorious for that. I'm known to be that way. It's just that I really want you to get curious about this. I really want you to start asking questions and form your questioning into a point that by the time you ask this question, you get those answers right away. It's the beauty of large language model and ChatGPT. As in, when you prompt it correctly the first time. You think you prompted it correctly the first time, but if you try a few more times, you realize that the first one wasn't that great, actually. Or even if it was only up to 80%. By the time you prompted it correctly, it gave you a better answer. So really, the first question is not the best question. By the time you had multiple interactions and you ask those questions differently, you come to realize that your questions are fine-tuning itself, and it becomes less expensive. But what I mean is that, if you ask the first question, what sort of large language model do I need? Well, I need ChatGPT. Well, by the time I have third or fourth, fifth question, I'm looking at myself like, well, I need the free ChatGPT, which is not necessarily made by OpenAI. It's made by Facebook. And I do it for free. And if I get that for free, I can start with free and scale myself up and still keep control of what it is that I want as an output, right? So you have multiple levels of questions that you have to do. So feel free to give us a call, right? Feel free to look at our website. We are expanding into the multiple sides of things, one being semiconductor chips industry, but we are super focused on the workforce, right? If you are an employee and you think there's a potential in your organization to engage with artificial intelligence and machine learning, approach us. We'll help you ask that question to your senior leadership, to the decision makers, so that way the decision makers are informed and encouraged to approach this topic in the right way, which is with good return on investment and better productivity, right? And I think that's what matters, is that you ask the right question, and let us help you with those questions. Thank you so much for listening. I'm looking forward to your questions and future interactions. Thank you very much.